All right. So for section 1.2, what we're going to be looking at is the difference between a population and a sample, and the reason for needing to work based off of a sample when we're doing a study. And then also, what are some of the best ways that you can go about getting a sample that's going to be most useful for you to be able to make um, suggestions or inferences about what you know concerning the population. So the first thing here is a little diagram here. And you can see I already got the word all there. That's not going to be on your handout yet. So go and just put the word all there. So population is going to be all of the cases that you are interested in doing a study about. So for example, we I might want to be doing a study about college students. And even if you just think about ACC, we've got like more than 40,000 ACC students. And so if I wanted to do what's the average amount of time that ACC students are studying, it would take me forever to go and try to collect that data from each and every single one of them. So the plan B would be to try to figure that out, but just using a smaller sample. So a smaller sample, again, the way that they describe it, they say like a subset, but right here I'm just going to put it's a smaller portion. And I'm just going to write that a smaller portion of the population. And so again, you could think of some numbers like how many people will we need to do. Just think of a number that's a bit more feasible. You know, we can't do 40,000 students. There's just no way. There's too many of them. Um, but maybe if we did like 100 of them, right? And if you're thinking, no, I want to do like 500, again, think of it like just you by yourself needing to go out and survey a sample of students. Like, what could you do? Maybe 50, maybe 75, right? Especially with a limited number of like weeks. If you only had 2 weeks to do this, I mean, maybe shoot for like 100 of them. But you would hope that when you collect the data from that 100 students, that you get a pretty good idea from them what's the average amount of time that they're spent studying, and then that might give you a suggestion of what is close to the reality for the population of all college students. So we're relying on a sample. So some of your big keywords are going to be today population, right? So a population is going to be your big, large group of individuals, but it's going to be all of them, right? There's not going to really be a specific number for them. It's always just going to be, whoa, think about like voters, right? It could be millions of voters. There's a lot of them. But when you want to know something about a population and there's just way too many of them for you to go and survey all of them, then you're gonna rely on a sample to give you a best guess. And again, the word that they use sometimes is a sample is a subset. And again, if you want to put just next to that or right below it, a smaller portion of the population. And so what we're trying to do is use the information that we get from a sample to say something that we think might be pretty close to true for the population. Now, as I mentioned, there's two main ways that we're going to look at being able to collect information from a sample. First, we're going to start off with the no-no, right? And one time I had a student one time say like, "Oh, is bias bad?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good way to kind of put it." But in 1948, they were doing a presidential election was happening, and it was candidate Dewey going against Truman. And as what happens with all of our elections is typically a like surveys are sent out to kind of get a prediction of who's more likely to win when November comes around. And the way they did it in 1948 was they did a telephone survey, and it was a large one. So they reached out to a lot of people, and based on the consensus of those people from the telephone survey, it seemed like Dewey was going to be the one that was going to win, but they were wrong. They even posted a newspaper about it with a headline saying, "Hey, Dewey defeats Truman," before the actual election actually happened. But when the actual election happened, Truman won. So they got the sample led them to an incorrect conclusion. And so what went wrong? What went wrong was that the sample was biased. And so we're going to go and put right here sampling bias. Sampling bias is anytime that you end up collecting or doing some sort of method to get a sample, but the sample does not represent really the voice of the opinions of the entire population. Like it's not as, it doesn't have the diversity that the population really has. And so here's one thing I want you to think about is think about 1948. You know, who more likely back in 1948 were the individuals in the country who more likely were going to own telephones? Who were the individuals or who were the families that probably owned a telephone back in 1948? And if you're thinking either those who were wealthy or those who were rich, that's the idea, right? Maybe those who were more like wealthy. And is a big reason why this sample ended up going off track is because it was about this time that the wealthy were more in favor of Dewey, and so they ended up polling a lot more like wealthy people, and which didn't represent the entire country at that time. So if you do a mass poll, email surveys, these are not random. Okay, what these are considered to be just only volunteer based. And the reason why people like doing these is because you can get a lot of people. If you just send out a bunch of emails or do a bunch of phone calls, you're going to get a lot, maybe a bigger sample size. But what's going to happen is you're going to lose the diversity. You're not really going to get a good mixture of, let's say, like, again, going back to the political idea of, Republicans, Democrats, people who are richer, people who are poor, kind of like a mixture, like of everybody. If you do just a big, giant, like mass, like, hey, this, let people choose if they want to respond or not, you're going to get more bias. You're going to end up people responding who are more interested in the topic. So suppose I wanted to do a survey about, hey, like smoking on campus, and I sent it out to a whole bunch of people, then what might likely happen is people who smoke might be the ones like, oh yeah, I'm going to respond to that survey because I have an invested interest in smoking. And someone like me, I don't smoke. I might not have the time or want to devote time to the survey, so I might not even bother responding to it. So you get a larger proportion of people who are going to respond who are invested in it, so it skews your data. So volunteer based or large mass polls that are not random are not the best way to go if you're trying to get good representation, a good mixture of the population. So to counter that, um, or to contrast that, is in 2008, a more closer recent study was when Obama, and I believe it was Obama versus Romney, um, they did a sample, but the key word, and this is the word of all words for this lesson, is the word random. It was not a large number of people. Think about the millions of people who vote. They only did 2,847, right? But it's not the size of it that's giving this its power. It's that it was a random sample, which increases the likelihood that they're going to have a good mix of Republican, Democrat, richer, poorer. They're all in there. And what it came out was that about 52% of those who were going to be voting were going to be favoring Obama. And what actually really happened was 53%. So they almost nailed it perfect, right? They were only off by 1%. So the little question there is what went right? And it's because they did a sample, and it's right now we're not thinking about how big the sample was. The thing that we're gravitating towards is the idea that it was a random sample, like a good mixture of people from the target population, which would have been American voters. And what's great about the way they did the whole idea of randomness is that everybody had the same chance of being selected, right? So like kind of think of like your soup, right? If you make a soup and you throw all your ingredients in, and then you just take a big old bite, I mean, you might get just a big bite of like your seasoning, and not a whole lot of like the other stuff. So you mix it up. That way each bite has like a good little bit of like the seasoning and the the broth and the meat and the vegetables, like everything's kind of all in there. That's what you want to do with these random samples is like mix them up and get a good mixture. And so what we call this is a more representative or an unbiased sample. So biased is the bad one, unbiased is the good stuff, right? The good mixture stuff that you can use to make generalizations about the population. Now, a couple of examples just to kind of contrast these two little scenarios that we saw a second ago. First of all, uh, in this example here, again, just take kind of a moment for yourself to read it. Again, I'm going to be quiet for about 15 seconds. Read the prompt and underline, who the study was about and how they collected the data and what the variable was. Right? Kind of look at A. A wants to know like what was the population, what was the sample, what was the variable. And again, if you're wondering like, wait, what am I looking for? Right. As you read the prompt, underline like who the study, who was the target of the study, who was it that they were trying to collect information from. Those would be your cases. And then underline the variable. What was the thing that they were at? What sort of information were they trying to collect from each of these individuals? And the thing that you might have seen in the prompt, first of all, was American voters, right? As opposed to like Canadian voters or voters from like another country. They're targeting American voters. And then the main variable was which candidate was preferred, which would be Romney or Obama or Romney. So here's what we're going to do with this information. First of all, you're going to have a homework question that asks you what's the population, and another one that at the same time might ask what's the sample. And it's going to feel like you're writing the exact same two things, but the population would be all American voters. And so they were asking what are the cases, you would just put American voters. But since they're asking for the population, I think a safe word to use is all. Every single one of them, millions of them. Then the sample would be the smaller portion. They only ended up collecting data from 3,252 American voters, right? So this is like your big cloud, and this is like your little cloud. Cool. All right. Now, as far as the variable, again, I have it underlined there. It's the presidential candidate that they preferred. So you can write something like preferred candidate. And because it's only two choices, Obama or Romney, it'd be categorical. And then here's something I'm going to do. I'm going to go and put the short answer for C. Right? It says, could the results be generalized to the entire population of 126 million American voters? The short answer is yes, but I want you to see why is it that we are able to have such a confidence or reliance in that sample. See if you can go back to what about the sample itself made it that it's probably a really good quality sample. Again, it's there's really just one word that stands out that should stand out. And again, it's the word of all words today, which is random, right? So these were not just people who self-selected and decided that they wanted to be part of the study. They were randomly chosen. So in that case, increases the chances that they were a good mixture of, Republican, Democrat, Independent, rich or poor, different religion types, all kind of mixed up in there. And so, yes, we probably have pretty good confidence that sample is going to give us a pretty close, accurate result, close to what the population actually really believes or has as a value, and the explanation would be yes, right? Because yes, since they randomly selected American voters, and you're thinking, wait, do I really need to put that it was American voters? I would. I mean, I'm going to stress really it's the randomness that makes this sample uh, have pretty good, give us a lot of confidence that this is a pretty good sample because it was random. But also that it was American voters. So, and some students are like, it kind of feels kind of like a duh, of course they're going to be American voters. But no, I mean, if I was doing a study about ACC students, I wouldn't go ask survey like Texas State students, right? So, now, here's one to kind of contrast that one. It says driving with a pet on your lap. So the study focused on drivers. So that's going to be those are the cases. And they were able to get 30,000 responses using an online poll. Have you ever driven with a pet on your lap? And again, the answers are either going to be yes or no. So in this one, again, just kind of a repeat, the population would be all the drivers, and then the sample would be just the smaller proportion or smaller portion of those, which would be the 30,000. Now, we might assume that hopefully, if they responded, that they actually were really drivers. Not sure that everybody who responded is guaranteed to be a driver. So I'm just going to put 30,000 people or 30,000 responses. And then the variable was the whole question about whether you've ever driven with a pet on your lap. And again, we can shorten that, pet on lap um, or if you want to just go ahead and put like both choices, pet on lap or not, which would be categorical, since it's either like a yes or no thing. But then I'm going to put no, but I want you to put, and again, it's asking, can the results, can we use these results to say that 34% of all drivers have driven with a pet on your lap? Like, would the results from this sample, do we have a lot of confidence uh, in those? But mainly look back at how the sample was collected, and why is it maybe that this thing could have been biased, or what is lacking from the the way that it was collected. And it's really going back to right here. It was an online poll, but notice that they didn't ever mention anything about the 30,000 people being randomly selected. These are just volunteer based. They could have decided whether they wanted to participate or not. And think about the context of the study. Who were the individuals more likely to see the question and be like, "Ooh, yeah, I want to respond to that"? Probably people who own a pet, right? Like, and me, like, I mean, yeah, I have pets, but I mean, I'm not a big animal person. That's just me. I probably would have been like, no, I don't have time to respond to that. And so you probably would have had a lot more pet people who would have responded, and probably got that number to be a little bit higher than what it actually really should be. And so you could say no. And then as reasons as to why we don't have a lot of confidence in this one is that no, um, was not the sample. I'll say this sample. No, Sample is likely bias since was not random. It was only volunteer based. So the idea here is that, well, what if they had wanted to do still this study, but try to avoid from it being biased? Again, the word of all words today is that if they wanted to do a sample so that they could have more confidence in the result, is that they need to first randomly select the people who are they're targeting. Then it's okay to do the poll. So again, doing the random select is try to get you a good mixture of of the drivers, people with pets, without pets, um, people who have different levels of like sense of security, whether it's safe or not safe to drive with a pet. Just a good mixture of just people, and then go ahead and poll them. So the reason why I write the answer this way is that I don't want you to walk away thinking that doing emails or polls are bad. Mass polls and emails are going to be probably biased. So it's okay to do emails and polls and surveys and these types of things as long as you're first randomly selecting. That way you can get a good mixture. Now, you are eventually in this class going to be doing a project where you're going to be collecting data from individuals, and it's not anything that we're going to be trying to like publish or produce in an article where we need our results to be, as close to like what the population would say. So there's also convenience samplings that if you're just doing it mainly to get the practice of collecting data, that's fine. It doesn't have to be random. But if you are planning on publishing your results to like the mass audience, to out to the public, then yeah, you're going to want to do like a random sample. That way you get a good mixture that your sample is a good representation of the population. So the two big key things is, again, if you're ever doing a study and you really, really want to be as confident in the results as possible, and you're relying on the sample, make sure that the sample is randomly selected and that when you are selecting these individuals that you're selecting from your broader target, which I haven't used the word broader yet, but I'm going to illustrate that down below. What do we mean by needing it to be really broad? And again, just one more, just man, really trying to hammer this thing as much as possible when it comes to the need for things to be random. Um, this is one that I just pulled from the textbook, but it's that they wanted to do a study about U.S. residents, but very specific. Age is 18 to 34. And so here's what they did. They did a random sample of 808 U.S. residents, but check it out, that were between 18 and 34. So they're being very specific here about who their target was and how they selected those individuals. So the big question that they have here is, can the results be used to generalize to the bigger population? Again, just trying to really hammer this home is like, yes, because yes, this is a good. The results are probably pretty accurate, not perfect, but probably pretty accurate, because yes, since randomly selected U.S. residents 18 to 34. And again, I'm just going to underline sort of the main word from there is like the randomness. And they went after their target. They wanted specifically US residents that were 18 to 34. Now, the last thing that I've got here, and then we'll close out for with just kind of a few extra little important side things. It's just a real quick combination of which of these would be sort of your biased, which are the bad ones, and then your unbiased, collecting data in such a way, using a method to get a sample in such a way that it's going to be more representative of the broader target. So in this scenario, we're suggesting the idea that what if we wanted to collect data from students at ACC, but I'm going to go ahead and put the word all, right? We want to know something about all of the students who are at ACC. And specific, we're trying to get how many hours a week that they study. Which of these would be biased or unbiased? If we asked a random, this is great. We asked a random sample of students at Highland. All right, and again, just trying to pause for like a few moments for you to like kind of think about it. It's like, well, it sounds pretty good because they did it randomly, but does Highland represent all of ACC? And the short answer is no, right? I mean, ACC is not just Highland. We've got, Riverside, we've got Hayes, we've got online students. And so it being that there's just one campus being focused on, this would be biased. In other words, bad, right? Where it doesn't include everybody. And so off to the side on the homework, what you do is explain what is the fix. So we like that it's random. That's great. But what's missing is that need to include other campuses. And if they do the randomness at other campuses as well, then you get the full representation. B is meant to be an example that everything looks pretty good. I mean, go ahead and read B and put like a little check mark by where is the randomness and put a little check mark by where is that the broad target is being included. Like everyone has a chance of being selected. Yeah. And again, you could put either representative or you could put unbiased. And again, the main things here is that it's mixed. Whenever they select, that's the randomness. And then every student was represented. So those are the two main things that you're looking for. And again, the bigger of the two that has the hierarchy is that randomness. Then of course, yeah, we want ACC students. We need to give everyone a chance of being selected and not accidentally go and do, Texas State students if that's not who we're after. The other thing now is what if we were to send an email, but it is sent out to all students? Would this be biased or unbiased? And again, just trying to really hammer it home today. What's missing? The randomness. Right. So again, if you send out a big email, that's going to help you get a lot more people probably to respond, but it's biased. But the way that we would fix this is that we need to first need to randomly select and then email them. Right. So that's it. Just you're trying to interject the idea that we first need to get that randomness. That way we get a good mixture of students from different programs, different degrees, some students who work, don't work, students who have families, students who don't, students who are taking a full course load, students who are not. So a good mixture. If you just do the email, you might end up getting just a one-sided group of students who don't represent everybody. So all right. So now the last thing that I want to touch base on is not only could your samples be biased because you don't randomly select, but you could also get biased responses. Again, just kind of read through these. Wording bias is that there might be a specific word or like a phrase that either gets people angry or makes them feel that if they don't respond a certain way that um, they're not intelligent somehow. I mean, there's certain words that can just kind of make people feel a certain way, so that they're more likely to say yes or they're more likely to say no because of that word that's influencing them. Leading context is, they might include like a picture or like a letter that somehow makes people feel like, kind of pulls on their heartstrings and kind of influences them to give more of like a yes response rather than no. And then the other one is response, just kind of more generically. Now, response bias is kind of really all of this stuff, like why people might give less than accurate answers. But the other one is just that if it's a sensitive topic, if it somehow someone, if they were to say yes, it's going to embarrass them. So they say no for that reason. So all I want you to really be thinking about is whenever it comes to questions where it says comment on why responses might be biased, not the sample themselves, right? Unless it's asking about the sample, why the sample might be biased, talk about that. But if it asks why responses might be biased, talk about that. So take a moment to read part A just for yourself. Again, I'll be quiet for a little bit or pause the video, but read A and see if you can underline maybe what about the prompt in here might make people more likely to say yes or more likely to say no because of that thing that's included in the prompt. And then again, I'm gonna go maybe an extra like 10 or 20 seconds. Also do the same thing for B. Like what inside this prompt might be because that is included in the prompt, it might influence people to say more yeses rather than no, just because of that one little extra thing that was embedded in there. 11:45 after doing office hours, and then the class starts at 12. I can do that a little bit. I like right now. I'm about to finish like in 5 minutes. Okay, so the things that we want to pull out from here, first of all, in part A, is the letter. So when you respond to this on the homework, that's the thing that you want to mention, the letter. But then give some explanation as to like why, like what about the letter and what it's going to do to people. So this is one of those homework questions where you want to be like just more detailed about it, and I'll say a few different things. The letter might freak people out and scare them about the challenges of being a parent. So they're gonna say no. I wouldn't do it all over again, right? I mean that could be a way that but you want to be just real explicit, real detailed about your answer. In a moment, I'll write something here, but again, you can kind of write something. The letter might freak people out or get them worried or scared, so that they say no. I don't want to do it all over again. And then for B, again, hopefully you maybe have started to write some things, but the main thing from here is the words. I mean, to say allow versus like forbid, a word like forbid might sound very aggressive, might sound very intimidating, it might sound like threatening. And so people are like, respond more strongly against this, say, like, yes, like, should do you think the U.S. should not forbid? Like, yes, they should not forbid because that's they're trying to control us or something. So I'll write something in a second, but yeah, you would just want to make sure that you mention the word forbid and say what it might do to people. Forbid might make people feel like threatened or they're being like attacked, and so they respond more aggressively, against that. And again, for the sake of the completeness of notes, I'll write some things, but here I'll at least write kind of thing the letter. Actually, I'll go ahead and just finish these off right now, just to kind of keep it like done, so we can move on to the last little part here, right? The letter, and again, use just kind of your own words, right? The letter might scare or concern or cause concern. So some. Yeah, they might just like freak them out. They're like, no, 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 I don't. I would not have kids again if I had to do it all over again because I'm so scared now because of the letter. And then the word forbid. The word forbid might seem. It's also not a good idea to be using uh, like not, never. Um, Something like that, again, it might influence them to say like more yeses, but just anything that gives me the idea that that you let me know in terms of like why the responses might have been triggered to be more yeses or nos. But what about the prompt, like the words, the context, the letter? All right, and then I want to give you just one more example that it says the National Survey on Drug Use and Health conducted a study focused on young Americans. Okay, so that's the target, young Americans. They used a random sample of college students, and 22%, that's the result, said that they had used illicit drugs in the past year. So, first of all, do we have any concerns about sampling biased? Right? The way that they did the sample, does it sound good? And then did everybody who they wanted to have included in their target actually get a chance to get selected to be part of the study? So a couple things I want to point out as we finish this lesson is like, was it random? Yes, so that is good. But did it include all young Americans? Were all young Americans given the chance to get selected in there? And this one kind of sneaks by students. Not everybody catches this one. They're like, "Oh, it's random. It was good," but it was only college students, right? And so if this is all American, all young Americans, but they only did college students, they're missing a lot of students who are not in college. I mean, who are young Americans, but they're not college students. So here's what we got for this. So first of all, for the first one, yes, sampling bias. Since only includes college students and not young Americans outside of school. So it's not broad enough. Okay. Now, response bias is also one of the main reasons why I'm ending with this last one. Is like, do you think that everybody honestly said yes when they should have said yes and said no when they should have said no? Probably not, right? I don't think there's going to be everybody who has used illicit drugs in the last year who's going to be honest and admit to that. So this one also has response bias. All right, there we go. Sorry, I lost my connection for just a second there, but yeah, response bias since some again, just try to be a bit more like detailed. Like, I mean, I could imagine someone saying, some might have lied, but try to be a bit more explicit as to like why. Some might have lied because they don't want to get in trouble or they're afraid of admitting or might be embarrassed. And this one I just put they might be scared to admit that they have used drugs, don't want to get in trouble. So I mean, something, right? Just give me a little something that just kind of explains to me sort of like the sort of like some of the reasoning as to why they might have not given honest answers. And that's it. That takes care of our 1.2. Again, I hope this helps, but whenever you are working on your homework, this one definitely has some where it's not just like one word or two-word answers. You're trying to give more reasoning as to like why. Now, some of them are pretty short explanations, and some of them a little bit longer, where you're trying to give me sort of like your thoughts, your insight, um, and then just be careful. Sometimes it's talking about why the samples might be biased as opposed to when the responses might be biased. But again, the big key word, the word of all words today was the word random. Random selection is the thing that helps us feel a lot more confident about our samples because of the mixture that's going to be included in those. But definitely, as you're going through the homework for 1.2, hop back to your lecture notes to kind of get reference to sort of like the level of detail that you need to have in your responses for the homework. All right, that is it. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. Have a good one.